Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed. I am your host, Michael Voss, the political dragon here I'm in the Bronx, but we are having a wonderful conversation from South Africa. That's right. We are live in South Africa as we speak over at the Kruger Reservation. Sorry for any background noise you may hear because it is New York. Can't help it. But we're having a conversation in South Africa, of course, with John Briscoe. Now, John Briscoe is running for the California 42nd Congressional District, and we're going to find out why is he running, what are some of the issues that he is running on, the platform that he is presenting to voters, what he expects to do if he is elected. And you can see he's on the stage right here with me as we speak. So without further ado, let me first introduce John Briscoe. Thank you for joining us. How are you doing today?
Every day is the best I got.
Well, that's always a good thing. Uh, Before we go forward, now I do want you to tell us a little bit about yourself, your who you are and what made you decide to run. But before I do that, the first question I think everyone in my audience is going to ask is, why are you in South Africa? Is it a business deal? Is it personal? What's going on?
It's personal. I'm blessed, truly blessed with a brother and a sister, and we enjoy each other's company, but we don't see each other that much. My brother lives a bit of ways, and my sister lives 2 states away. So once a year, we take a vacation together, all three of us, and we rent one room, and we stay in the room. So we get 3 beds in the place, and we've done several of these now. We tour, travel, eat, sleep, everything together. We get a full load of each other for that period of time, and it lasts enough for a year. It's a moment of great joy. This particular year has an additional poignancy. My sister's husband died 2 weeks ago,
Oh,
and so this is, and she's a, she's got, it's all, she had a husband, she has one daughter who is alive, and it's very difficult. He was her everything. They were a team together, and now he's gone. She lives in a big old house by herself now, and this trip is a huge adjustment cushioner for her as well. So this trip is personal. It's a vacation, and it's a place that took almost 25 hours of flying time between layovers and pickups and drop-offs and waiting to get here. And it's a place I anticipate. It's gorgeous. It's unbelievable. We'll be in Cape Town. We'll be in Kruger. We'll be in Zambia and Zimbabwe with Victoria Falls. But it's a place, and we went to Dubai also. I don't need to go to any of those places ever again, I don't think, with the airfare travel time slug. So there's more than you care to know about the trip. It's personal. It's really fun. We went on a couple safaris now at the place we're staying, and it's phenomenal. It's wild animals in the wild, and they don't come out because they put kibble out to attract them to the side of the road. We have to go find them, and we found an incredible array of animals. Today we saw an aardvark, which is something that most people at work here have never seen. They're very nocturnal, hard to see, and it's fun. So that's a lot more about my vacation. Your listeners probably care to hear, but I'd recommend it.
well, the only thing I remember about aardvarks is from the cartoon, The Pink Panther, it was always the blue aardvark. So that's about as close as I have ever gotten to seeing an aardvark. I know younger people will not know what that means whatsoever. It's oh well. Uh, and we do, of course, want to extend our condolences to your sister and to all of your family on that loss. We are sad to hear about that. Um, so now we understand why so you're not just in South Africa this year. It sounds like you're a world traveler. You've been in several locations, I take it, over the past many years. Is that correct?
I have traveled around the world with my wife of 49 years, and then my siblings. Yes, I've been to pretty much all the places we want to go, except for Egypt and India and
Okay.
Angkor Wat. Angkor Wat.
Okay. So I imagine that means you have some knowledge or an ongoing knowledge of international politics, if for no other reason to know where not to be in the world at any given time. But also, I would imagine, is that something that you follow in terms of your politics as well?
I do. I'm an avid reader, and I have a lot of data feeds and the things going on in the world of great interest. Especially the trends in Europe and the insanity of Ukraine being invaded by somebody. The whole world. This current presidential race has highlighted the disaster in foreign policy that we're stuck suffering under with the current administration, beyond disaster, between Afghanistan departing in one day and $80 billion of stuff left there and 13 Americans dead, to the invasion by Hamas into Israel. And that's a difficult one too, by the way. As a side note on that, I try to delve into details. What I found in my life is the devil's in the details. If you don't go look at what's holding up the table legs holding up the tablecloth, you'll be disappointed. And in Israel and Hamas, I've learned since the thing started, I have a number of Palestinian friends. In Israel and Hamas, Israel supplies all the gas and all the water to Gaza. So
Mhm.
it's like a client state. I talked to one Palestinian friend who owns some businesses, and I found out that the currency that Palestinians use is the shekel. They don't use the Gaza currency because it's unreliable. Where do Palestinians in Gaza keep their money? They don't keep it in a little Palestinian bank down the street. They keep it in Israel, in Israeli banks, because it's secure and safe. There's this giant, and yet they teach their children for 12 years to kill, 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 hate, hate, hate Jews. The curriculum is awful. So it's not easy. I don't have, if you're going to ask me, I don't have any great cures or solutions to the situation. It's just a complete mess with all those intertwinings and intertanglings. You have Israel supplying everything to the client state Gaza, and the client state Gaza being raised and brought up on hate, hate, kill, kill the Jews who live next door. What's my one of my friends, Palestinian friends, Nasser, said that if elections were held today, tomorrow, or next year, Gaza residents would support Hamas 80%, regardless of what disaster their actions have brought upon the people, regardless of the fact that the Palestinian Gaza leadership is all living out of the country in luxury. So it's, how do you fix that? I don't. It's really awful. I don't have a good idea. One aspect I haven't seen, if you're interested, and maybe you're not, the Palestinians are Muslim, and Muslim observant practicing Muslims are not allowed to pay interest. So observant and practicing Muslims do not take out home loans. So think about this. All those buildings you've seen bombed in Gaza by the Israelis with the 2,000-pound bombs and everything, not the tunnels underneath and everything else withstanding, just the destruction of the housing infrastructure. Those housing infrastructure destructions represent the vast physical monetary possession of the citizens. Those houses are all owned free and clear. Think about that. So Avalon, Catalina in California, the city, 95% of the homes on Avalon are owned free and clear. There's no other city in the country probably that has almost every single property in the city owned free and clear. In Gaza, they're all free and clear. So in Israel went in and bombed everything to pieces besides bombing out Hamas leadership. The Palestinian people they have no finance. They don't have insurance to cover their 100% free and clear home. It's going to take, it seems to me there's been some calculus done that it's going to be a 30, 40-year process for the Palestinian people to rebuild their homes, regain, retread, and start over again to build up what's been bombed to smithereens. And I'm wondering if that's part of the strategy to not be invaded again and have robbery, rape, and killing and head chopping and kidnapping happen. Anyway, I care about it a lot, and it makes it a very difficult thing. I follow international, and that's the kind of depth and detail I try to think about things, because it's not just good, bad, they, and them. But most things I've looked at, there's intertwinings and relationships that should be explored and understood.
Well, like in all politics, there is no simple yes or no, left or right. There's always more to it than just what many people may try and oversimplify on the surface level.
Michael, that's not true. The Democrats told us that the piece of trash that they presented in the so-called bipartisan, whatever it was, that bill for the border bill, and one Republican voted for it, making it bipartisan, was a clean, wonderful device. And because of that failure to approve it, that's the reason we have 18 million people invading our country. Well, when you look at the bill that the Republicans correctly voted no on, they had this is the detail part. They had a piece in there about up to 5,000 people a day could sneak across the border legally, illegally into the country, get a card, and then come back and show up to immigration court 7 years later. 5,000 a day. Oh, and that's not the important part. The detail is that 5,000 was only for Mexicans, only contiguous countries. Any illegal alien invading from Salvador, Guatemala, Africa, anywhere else, wasn't included in that 5,000 number. So the bill was a piece of trash. It was a subterfuge to try to confuse the electorate. And that's the reason it shouldn't have been approved, not because it was the Republicans hate anybody. So that's, you know, all that stuff already anyway.
Actually,
That's
I've
the kind of
covered
thing
it.
that,
I covered it at the time in detail. So yes, I am familiar with what you're
well, then,
speaking about.
anything wrong? Was I incorrect on any things I said?
I'm not aware of the limitation on contiguous countries, but I am familiar with and have reported on the fact that it does allow 5,000 illegal aliens per week, as I recall, into the
No,
United States.
I
It
think
may be
it was
per
per
day.
day.
It may
I think
be
it was
per
per day.
day. I remember per week. I could be wrong on that.
But
But
anyway,
whether it's 5,000 per day or 5,000 per week, it's allowing individuals who otherwise are unauthorized to be into the to enter into the United States and to receive services. And our only guarantee is they're going to be given a summons to show up in court somewhere within the next 3 years, usually at the end of that 3 year period, based on goodwill and trust, which is insane. There's many problems with that bill, and we have covered it on the channel in depth.
oh, good. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who has endorsed me, by the way, and who I went to one of his rallies a year ago, spent half of his time on the stage talking about the illegal alien invasion. And he said that there's a whole that there's human trafficking and drugs that go along with the invasion numbers. And anyway, he talked about the enormity of the problem, and nobody else is talking about it. I'm not necessarily an RFK Jr. policy supporter, but he had an incredibly precise discussion of the disaster that the Biden administration has created. And to sit there and watch Mayorkas in Congress lie, just, well, people lied and people died. Anyway, I do follow foreign policy and foreign affairs, and I try to delve into things to understand. I'm glad you covered those items and issues, because it was a trash bill and it should have been vetoed.
Absolutely. It was a horrible bill. It does not serve the purpose, well, any purpose that it is declared. And we've gone into that. Now, you did mention something, and I do want to take a step back in a second, but you mentioned that you were endorsed by RFK Jr. Now, you are a Republican. RFK Jr. is traditionally a Democrat, if not progressive, currently running as an independent in the 2024 election. I did not see the endorsement in my review of you and or your site, um, your website, or any of the background I was looking for. I don't see that, and I was just double checking here as we're live, as we're speaking. Can you tell me, when did he do that?
I believe last week at my senior field advisor, PT, secured that. And it's really not a party endorsement. I'm running for the U.S. Congress, 42nd district. The district I'm running in is 16% Republican, 55% Democrat, and it's 50% Hispanic. So those are formidable odds. I ran this in 2024 in March, California primary, and I secured 35% of the vote. I earned more than twice my party registration. My candidacy and my victory in November this year, I beat two other Democrats, will be based on what I stand for and what I believe, not my party. And so I would throw the same thing out. I'm honored and privileged to be endorsed by RFK Jr. He's a very brilliant thinker, outspoken man, and everything he says I don't agree with. A lot of his, like you said, his policies tend to be progressive and on the other side of the ledger. But I'm endorsed because of things that I do stand for, and it's an honor to be there. And we're not going to get anything done if we don't work together. And he's an example, and that kind of cooperation is what will make things happen. I will make things happen in Congress by working with people to get things done correctly and right. It doesn't. Anyway, that's why. So it's a new event. I'll be making large of it, and I truly am honored to be endorsed by him. And it's not a party endorsement because he's an independent. It's interesting. It lends credibility to my claim to be a consensus builder and somebody who will get things done, because I do get things done.
Okay. If you can, please, after we're done, send me a link to that endorsement, because I can't find it right now, and I'm just searching as we're speaking, and I did not run into that in my review of you. So obviously, I would want to provide that so the public will be able to see that for themselves. But you are correct, and let me take a step back. Obviously, the California 42nd race, for people who are unfamiliar with that, is out of Long Beach, California, which is just outside of Los Angeles proper for a lot of people who aren't familiar. So it's in that region, which is very heavily Democratic. Although, if you get further and further away from the large metropolitan cities in California, you get to see more and more uh, Republican, conservative, libertarian areas, but the cities themselves are more Democrat and progressive. And this is similar to what we see across all of America. In the race you're in, you're actually going against an incumbent in his second term. This is Robert Garcia, who is noted by the news media and research that I've done for being LGBTQ. He's gay. And so that is his claim to fame, as well as being the former mayor of Long Beach. You've had some time to address him. I should also mention that this is not the first election you have run for. You ran in 2018, 2020, 2022, and now in 2024. It is correct that you have been increasing name recognition and returns in each and every one of the primaries and in the November elections. You have increased your position. You have gotten more. In fact, I believe it was, I have the name of the newspaper here somewhere. Oh, the Press Telegram, which is a local newspaper, was commending you on what they considered a surprising increase and drive that you had and results that you have been able to garner in 2022 alone, and their expectation in February of this year that you were going to easily be the main competition for this congressional race, which has been true. Now, at the same time, we have seen that one of the other things happening is we're seeing there's a lot more voter apathy for the Democrats, as we have seen that since 2018, the votes, both in primary and it seems in the main elections, are down 24%. Fewer people are actually being involved, 72% down from 2020. And at this moment, the primary voting was down 2% versus 2022. So fewer people are being involved in the election, which, considering that Democrats have won those last three elections, we would have to believe they're dissatisfied with what they have elected and the service they've gotten. Do you disagree with anything I've said there, or would you like to enhance that?
At the end of the day, I can't do anything for any of my constituents if I don't win. So my focus is on what is the path to victory so I can represent the community. The things I stand for represent what the people in the community need and want. The things Roberto Garcia stands for, not. And we can go do a comparison of issues and items, but the top line is the district consists of Long Beach, which is the anchor at the bottom, and the people that show up to vote down there, it's a tiny Republican base, and the Democrats that show up are progressive. They're more white than anywhere else in the district, and it's not a place I'm going to do a whole lot better penetrating. The northern tier, I call it, the cities north of Long Beach, with Lakewood up through Lakewood, Signal Hill, and Downey, Bellflower, Cudahy, Maywood, Huntington Park, Bell Gardens, Commerce. Some of those cities are 95% Hispanic, and they have a different take on life. There's a Hispanic family intact. It says, how you got mom and dad both working, 2 and 3 kids, and they're working in jobs that they have to drive to work to, and they're not managerial jobs at the top of an office tower. These people are being killed by the policies in the country we have right now and the results. My campaign is focused on 4 items. One, the paychecks are too damn small. And I say that in my candidate statement. I made the registrar of voters use the word damn. They told me it was a swear word, and I said, it's in the Bible, so you get a written legal opinion and I'll obey it. And they didn't, and they put it in. The paychecks are too damn small. The people in my 42nd district are suffering hugely. Second, the crime is too damned high. The business with homelessness the needles on the street and property theft is terrible. I have a solution for that. And the other side of that is also it's not just don't defund the police. Local city administrators, they beef up the police budget every year so they can say we gave more money to the police, and then they don't fill the positions. So it doesn't do any good if you have a budget for the police and you only spend 75% of it and you dump the rest of the money back into the general fund. That's another one of those detailed things that I mentioned earlier that's important to me to understand what in the heck's going on. So my position is fill all the darn positions. You'll get police on the street. And then the third item is a big one, and that's our children and our education. And I'm an elected school board trustee, and my background is 16 years on a school board, and I know the education system from the inside out. And there's so much more that needs to be done so much better. If we don't educate our children, we're going to have a bigger disaster on our hands because they are the future. And the fourth item is consensus. I want to work. I will work with everybody on all sides to get things done. We can't win by fighting at fisticuffs. We have to work together. That's what I stand for, and that's what I'm running for.
Okay.
Does that?
Well, that raises a question for me, John, because in looking and doing my research on you, I see that on your own website, your focus has been, and in prior elections, you've focused on homelessness, both at the state and local level, immigration at the federal and local level, infrastructure, which you may be able to say is part of the economy, but usually those are considered two separate things, and then healthcare. And education is something that you have consistently talked about, but those, according to your website and looking at some of the documentation I found, while education has always been in the backdrop and always something that you've spoken about, those are the four things that you have highlighted as being essential, but you've just told us four separate things. How do you balance that?
The economy, inflation, and that's been a consistent item I've talked about. And the crime, the homelessness, the crime. Homelessness is a big piece of that. And I have a solution for homelessness, and don't defund the police. The border is the other, that's concomitant to tie with the inflation part is the border invasion. We have 18 million people flooding in, and these people are taking jobs from U.S. workers at much lower wages. They're reducing the wage base rate for the constituents in my 42nd district. And then beyond that, they're also taking the jobs so that the wages that people do get paid are impacted, and then there's fewer jobs for people that should be here. But working together is the big piece. Infrastructure and health are not a focus of my discussion today. I have opinions about those, and Medicare is an impending disaster, and so is Social Security, but those aren't the focus things. I can talk about them, but I think my residents care that much about. My residents tend to be families, and the people are going to show up and vote for me, and they're not worried about Social Security way down the road. They're worried about $6 a gallon gas, $6 a dozen eggs. They're worried about safety of their kids walking to school past homeless people on the street with needles around, and they're worried about their jobs being taken and their wages being driven down. So the other infrastructure, the things you mentioned are important, but they're not important to me this election cycle of what I want to work on.
Okay, I understand that. So, John, I'm trying to understand the discrepancy. I understand that you may have a different focus based on your constituents, and that's fine. I'm not questioning that. I'm trying to understand the discrepancy here because you're saying that your focus in this election, 2024, are the items you're just mentioning in terms of the economy, in terms of police, and immigration is one that's consistent, but that's not consistent with what you're putting out on your website, which voters would go to see about your election. I'm trying to understand why.
I need to update it. Thank you. It should say that, and I thought it did. The infrastructure thing is and the healthcare are things I've talked about, but they're not the priority today. And with your input, thank you. I will fix those items. The items I want to talk about are the border invasion, the crime, the economy, and like you said.
Okay. Then, as part of, if you were to be elected into Congress, we know that your opponent, Mr. Garcia, has the only thing he succeeded at is naming two post offices. His most successful bill is H.R. 5301, which has the support of two members of Congress, which is And that's to eliminate useless records. He wants to eliminate duplication of records because our government is bloated and everyone acknowledges that. And even on a bill that everyone agrees on, he has the support of 2 members of Congress. It has less than a 40% chance of being passed. So that's not much of a record, but it also shows the hurdle that many new members of Congress may have. What impact, where do you believe you would have the most impact for your constituents and the nation in addressing the issues you brought up, which are police, economy, education, and consensus?
I would vote no on the spending. We cannot sustain this spending. We can't be giving hundreds of billions of dollars to countries to secure their borders when our allies in Europe don't even spend the 2% they promised on their military. Spending has to be cut and reduced. That's the first, and that impacts inflation immediately. And when the inflation is impacted and reduced, that helps the people live in my district. It fixes. The current administration talks about, oh, inflation is coming down. No, that doesn't fix anything. Prices have to come down. Inflation coming down just means instead of going up 8%, they're going up 5% or 6%. That doesn't fix it for the people that live in my district. So the economy is affected by the spend of the federal government. There's such asininity, I shouldn't use that word. There's such insanity that goes on. I've read repeatedly commentators go, oh, inflation was caused by COVID. Inflation was caused by the pandemic. Inflation, inflation is
No.
not caused by a virus. Inflation is caused by idiotic finance policy by the government, the federal government. And the control of the federal government finance is the US Congress. They hold the purse strings. If they can cut the salary and budget of Mayorkas to get rid of them, they can certainly cut the spending to stop the inflation spiral that we're in. We're never going to go down in prices of 30% that they've gone up in the last Biden years, but we should have prices go down. And the only way that's going to happen is with spending and control by Congress. And that is the answer. And I think you're going to agree. If we don't stop the spending, the inflation is not going to stop. And the American people are going to end up with the Jimmy Carter, Mr. Peanut disaster of 19%. My sister's first home loan, when she got it decades and decades ago, was 18% interest. 18% interest. And she was ecstatic and delighted. Oh my gosh, I qualified for an 18% interest loan. That's because inflation was screaming at 24%. Anyway, the inflation and the economy is the first fix.
No,
the homelessness.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
No, anyway, the economy is the first thing. The crime's too damned high. And homelessness is a big piece of that. Are you interested in my discussion about what a congressman might do to help fix the homelessness?
Of course.
Homelessness, first to start out, being homeless is not a crime. I'll say it again. Being homeless is not a crime. Being homeless and sleeping on the sidewalk, urinating in the alley, dropping your needles on the street, that is a crime depending on where you live. But the big piece that's not enforced, City of Santa Ana I've been advocating it for 4 years, 6 years. Santa Ana just started trying to do it. The people that are homeless, 60% tend to be substance abuse users, and 40% or 50% have mental illness issues. And the system currently doesn't address that. And letting people live in tents all over LA doesn't address it either. And down the street from your school and your kids and your homes. It's against the law to be under the influence on public property. I'll say it again to everybody listening. In every jurisdiction around the country in general, it's against the law for anybody to be under the influence on public property. That means the parkway, the sidewalk, the alley, the curb, the street. It's against the law to be under the influence. And under the influence is a pretty low standard compared to being drunk and like driving drunk. Under the influence is a broad brush, and it's enforceable. And so the local governments, to the extent they develop the backbone, the will, that Karen Bass from LA City, the mayor, is proud that she had hundreds of millions of dollars to spend on housing, and she's built 6 housing units or none. No, we need to spend money not on those kinds of programs, but on things that will help fix people and the situation. That consists of 2 things. One, we need to enforce the influence law. So when the police officers walk down the street and somebody's laying on the sidewalk with a bunch of cans of Old English around them, or other substances, the police can correctly interrogate and stop and say, are they under the influence? Have you been drinking? And if the answer is yes, then they can go in. If the answer is no, they can ask for a breathalyzer. We can determine if they have sufficient alcohol to be under the influence on public property. If the answer is yes, and a lot of these people will be found that way if they're sleeping out there, sleeping it off, they immediately go in front of a magistrate, immediately, like same day. And the magistrate says, here's the breathalyzer, or you can test for THC too. So THC, that's tetrahydrocannabinol, the stuff that makes marijuana. And we have these tests here, and what are you going to plead? Are you going to plead guilty? And if not, and so on and so forth. There's three answers that come back, and one is if the judge deems the citation, it's like a traffic ticket. If they deem the citation as being guilty, the individual has three choices. One is they can go to jail, and the judge will say, "Would you like to go to jail?" And the gal or guy is going to say, "Well, no, not really." And the judge will say, "Okay, we'll pay your fine then for $300. And they'll say, "Well, if I had $300, Your Honor, I wouldn't be here in front of you. I wouldn't be homeless." And the judge will say, "Okay, you either go to jail or you go to rehab." And so there's going to need to be money. Congress can spend money. If we can spend money for useless homeless programs that build housing that doesn't get built, we can spend money to put magistrates and courts in place to put people into rehab facilities to treat. It ends up being a one strike and you're out, because if you're back on the street after 30 or 90 days in rehab and recidivism is high, then this time you've broken the terms of your probation, and then you go to jail or you move to another city. And then eventually you maybe stop what you're doing. So homelessness on the alcohol and drug use side should be enforced, and it's not. And the local jurisdictions are going to need money in their law enforcement areas to make that kind of a roundup, because they don't do it now and they don't have the manpower. And Congress can allocate money for that and stop allocating money for housing programs that don't build any housing. Second is the mental illness part. And a number of people have mental illness.
One moment, John.
Yeah.
Before you go to the mental illness, because there's a lot in what you've said so far, and I need to break down a little bit of this so that we understand the components you've just mentioned. So, yes, it is correct that for people who are unaware, under the Carter administration, we had double-digit inflation. It was about 24%. I was alive during that time. I am familiar with that. And yes, we did have housing interest rates in terms of credit cards and mortgages were in excess of 15%, and many were in the 19-20% range overall. So that is something that historically is correct and important. The biggest driver of inflation is not COVID or anything to do with it. It has always been that government spending, the national debt, is the number one driver of inflation, with the secondary factor being energy costs, which affect businesses and individuals. Those two factors are the top two reasons why inflation has been skyrocketing, and the one that we have the most control over would be government spending. This is correct. So, but you're not against entirely government spending, it sounds like, even though you're saying you want to reduce it, but you are saying that you're willing to have government spending, such as you brought up the example of Karen Bass, the mayor of LA, who has received federal funding to help those who are homeless, which she has been ineffective at doing in terms of building additional housing units for the homeless and the public. And you have also suggested in your solution to homelessness, addressing those who are under substance abuse, which is roughly about 60% of those who are homeless have suffered from that abuse. And I should note, I am someone who has been homeless twice, not because of mental illness, not because of drugs or any substance abuse, just because of business failing. And I've been very public about that.
Michael, it's not even that. A friend of mine was cheating on his wife. His wife found out, and she said, "We're going to go to counseling," and he refused. So she kicked him out. He was homeless in one night. He lived in his car for a week, and he eventually moved in with his girlfriend. After 6 months, they realized it was nowhere. And my friend and his wife are back together, have been together and stayed together, and they've been married for now going 48 years. But no, homelessness is all kinds of things. It's not illegal to be homeless.
Right.
And homelessness happens for business, for personal relationships, for bad decisions.
Yes. And for students, it happens to people of every age and every economic group for many, many reasons, It's one of the reasons why I'm an advocate for homelessness, because I've experienced it and I know it could happen to anyone. But your solution is very interesting because it involves one, federal spending, two, federal control over states and local governments, because you've suggested that individuals would have a one strike rule. So you're instituting a federal mandate. In addition to that, you are obliviating any state or local regulations in terms of public intoxication. The level of intoxication is suggested by what you've mentioned. And while it sounds like a very good local solution, this is something that, as a member of Congress, you're suggesting as a national. So for those who would say, well, that solution may work great for Long Beach, but it doesn't work great for the Bronx. It doesn't work well for any locality that has that the courts are already overburdened, say like Texas, which is dealing with the immigration crisis, and their courts are swamped with immigration courts and trying to resolve that. What is your answer to those? That it's inflationary, that it's increasing government overreach and oversight, and it is ineffective for certain regions across the country?
I would turn to my opponent as a bad example of what I'm not advocating to illustrate where I don't think the things you said are entirely accurate with what I'm saying. Roberto Garcia wants to make federal regulations for local parking rules in cities. It's the most inane thing that you can't believe it. He wants to take and make federal rules for local parking administration. And that's not what I have in mind. What I have in mind is money to support the courts so they can do their job. What in mind I have is the money to provide for enforcement that would be officers on the street. And if there is no rule in the city about public intoxication under the influence, then I guess there wouldn't be any money for them. I would encourage the city to put rules in. The federal government should
every
not.
state and city has intoxication rule, as far as I am aware of.
I would think they do, but and so that becomes no. I don't want federal. I'm against federal laws imposing into local areas. So whatever the local laws and jurisdiction is, that's what I would have my money, but the Congress, the U.S., the taxpayers' money go to support. And they're not doing it now is the issue because of all those reasons. There's not an interest, there's not education, there's no money for it. They're swamped. They don't have the judges to cover the jurisdiction of public influence under the influence. So no, what you said is not exactly what I had in mind. The one thing you did, but you answered the question. If there's no rule against being under the influence, then there's no money to give to go to enforce. But as you said, I think most places have those rules. So whatever the rules are, they need to enforce it and get people off the street, and either off the street into rehab or off the street into the next town. And the one strike you're out thing is I hadn't thought about that implication. I learn every day, by the way, and I think about these things a lot. I don't want to tell cities that they have to have a one strike and you're out rule, but I think it should be set up so that you don't keep getting the same person in every month after they get out of rehab back in again. So there needs to be something about the money we give is not going to support the with the individual who's a repeat offender that way.
Okay,
and that's not a very good articulation, but it's an interesting point. But we're not doing anything to enforce these things now. Instead, we're building free housing for people at $600,000 a unit in San Francisco, which is insane. I'm a low-income housing provider, Michael. I have personally, with my rentals that I pay my bills with, several dozens of Section 8 housing certificates. I'm a low-income housing veterans provider for the VASH program, the Veterans Administration Support Housing, where homeless veterans are given a HUD certificate and they get a place to live, many of them for the first time in many years. So I understand the nature of the sort of the people I'm talking about, and I support housing. I support the Section 8 program, and I am a recipient of the program and participate in it, but not building free housing for people and not giving away free housing for people. So that's not what I had in mind.
Okay. Well, that's why we're asking the clarification so that people get to have a better understanding. And this is it's fine.
I'd like to the part that didn't get touched upon enough. Ronald Reagan opened the doors and let all the people out of in California, Fairview and Norwalk, mental institutions that were locked down facilities with gates on the front. And supposedly money was going to be put into local community mental health programs, and it never happened. So that there are a number of people on the street, homeless people, who are clinically, mentally insufficient and a danger to themselves and society, that they need to be in a care facility under supervision with a guard gate at the front. We need to reopen those facilities. Camarillo, you may have heard these, Camarillo and Fairview and Norwalk. The properties are still there. They need to be reopened and staffed and manned. And that's going to take a lot of money. And that needs to have federal support as well. And those people need to be given help. So that's the other half on the mental. If you cover off the 60% substance and address the whatever it is, 30-40%, there's overlaps too of the mental health.
Overlap.
We've reduced the homeless number down to a much smaller, manageable number. There's still going to be homeless people out there, but they're not going to be tent city on every street.
Well,
in my
let me address. There's some 70% of individuals who are homeless have mental issues, or it's estimated to be in that range. And there is an overlap that they often use substance abuse. The substance abuse is in place of other medications that would help them. And so that's why we see there's a large overlap there. But that being said, so you are willing to use federal funding to help address the homeless issue, both the aspects of housing and the aspects of mental health. That's fine. So, and it sounds like you want to remove programs that are ineffective, that like Karen Bass has done, where we're spending $600,000 to buy a small home, essentially, and there is actually a category of housing that's called small homes. And we're overpaying for that, and yet still not providing service. So my question would be, you've said you want to shrink the government. How much would you want to shrink the government, but yet still spend on these other factors?
Let's see. I'm moving my power supply because my cell phone has decided to fritz on me.
That's okay.
Unroll that for me, please. So what programs do I want to unravel?
Well,
Is that what?
what I'm trying to understand is you want to reduce the federal government. So let's say there's a percentage, rather than trying to say this department, that department, because that always changes. But if there is a percentage you would vote for to reduce the federal budget, what would that be? But at the same time, is it correct that you want to still have federal spending that would be going towards mental health and or housing, substance abuse for the homeless? So you want these two things to happen at the same time, which can sound kind of at odds with each other, or am I missing something about that?
We've highlighted a really good problem with the budgeting and the discussion about budgeting, because most of the budget in the federal government budgeting thing is made up of military and non-discretionary spending like Medicare and Social Security. So when people talk about cutting the budget, they're fiddling around at the margins, really, in some number of ways. They're fiddling around with not half the budget, even less than half the budget. So somebody
20%
says,
or less.
yes, it is. So if we're going to say, oh, we're going to cut the budget by some number, that number isn't nearly as big as you might think it is, because all those other expenditures are mandated in statute, code, or in reality and practicality. So if I say anything you don't agree with or that sounds silly, please stop me.
Oh, I will. Trust me.
That's my so the I haven't I would say 10%. That'd be a huge chunk out of the 20% of remaining spending. It'd be a huge savings. It's a 10% cut, just a 10% cut, and it would not be an across the board 10% cut, because some programs, like the Department of Education, there's a prime example. Department of Education promulgated this thing called Common Core. And Common Core is in violation of the spirit of the law, even though they shoved it through the governor's conference to try to implement it. So those kind of sneak attack, sneaky peek programs come from excessive government regulatory expansion that's gone on. And so the Department of Education would need a much bigger cut. Cutting out the Department of Education entirely, I think that's been proposed by one presidential candidate. That would be Donald Trump, I think, is something worth considering. But that department needs to be way cut back, and the things that they do belong at the local level. And I work and live and love at the local level of school districts in my trustee role. So at 10%, 10% is the answer, but not 10% every department. Some will be a lot more, and some would be less. And what those lesses and mores would be, I don't have an answer on the phone here with you, but
That's fine.
10% seems a reasonable number to me. That'd be 10% of 20%, really. That's what we're talking about. Is that right?
Well,
yeah.
Roughly, yes. And to give an example of that, so you just mentioned removing the Department of Education, which there is a large number of people, both libertarians, conservatives, Republicans, Donald Trump, as you mentioned, have suggested doing so. That would be about $100 billion. And am I understanding it correct? So out of that, as an example, $100 billion, that would be where you would use some of those funds to address the homeless issue as you've outlined, or as you've generally outlined. Would that be where the money would come from, or is that new money that we would print? I just want that clarification.
Has to come out of existing programs. The housing subsidy thing is not exactly what I've advocated the way I've heard you describe it here, Michael. I'm a participant in the Section 8 program. Everybody wants free housing, for Pete's sakes. To get a housing certificate in Long Beach, you have to be legally poor, first of all. And who wants to be legally poor? But people are. They have to wait for 10 years. They die before they qualify for a subsidized housing certificate. There's never enough resources to go around for free housing, free food, and free whatever. So it's not the housing component. I'm focused in my homeless discussion on the substance use abuse and the mental illness component. And those are going to require money to help support enforcement of local regulation, local institutions, local agencies. And in the case of California, the state of California's stupid programs. The Newsom put in this thing called the miniature, the small home thing. He's supposed to have 600 of them built, or some giant number. He's built none.
Yeah.
Not a single spent money. I think that's what you were talking about. I don't know if Karen Bass had a small as well, but it's this stuff is insane, and nobody cares. Don't ask, don't tell, don't know, don't look, don't see. Anyway, that's so housing isn't part of that homeless solution. My focus would be on local law enforcement, local court jurisdictions, putting together the money to help create the organizations to enforce the laws that are not enforcing now, because they don't, like you said, in Texas, they don't have the courts, they don't have the police power.
Right. Okay. Thank you for the clarification, and thank you for correcting me on what I misunderstood. I appreciate that.
Right. But yeah, that's.
Now, let's move to a separate issue here. Now, in California, voters, according to PPCI, one of the state polling organizations, California voters know that that California is headed in the wrong direction. Approximately 62% of those who have been polled, this is a poll from June of 2024. At the same time, 77% of California voters, these are likely voters, are focused on climate change. And this is from a poll in July of 2024, this month. But of that group, out of the 77% who want to focus on climate change, 55% don't want to pay anything extra for renewable energy. Again, this is from PPCI. This is their polling data from June and July of this year. And so I am only quoting them on that. Now, given that your voter base is, according to this data, we're saying 62% of your voters know California is going in the wrong direction, which matches the national polling on the wrong direction of the nation, which is about 57%. It varies by about 2-3% at any given moment, but about 57% of the nation says we're in the wrong direction at the minimum. And there's this huge movement amongst Democrats and progressives towards renewable energy, in this case, 77% in California, but they don't want to pay for it. They want someone else to pay for it, which normally turns out to be you, me, and everyone else through taxes or other fees and funding and printing new money, which is inflationary. But given this is the scenario you find yourself in, what do you say to your constituents who say, well, yeah, but give me more renewable energy?
Huey Long, I think, said it in Louisiana. Don't tax me, don't tax thee, tax that fellow behind the tree. And that's how this government works. Tax somebody else will pay for it. So the answer is renewable energy. First of all, with an administration that comes in and when Donald Trump is elected, has a correct sense on things, needs to pay for itself. I practice what I preach. I put solar on my home. I have 36 panels. I have 2 battery packs, a big giant investment. I didn't lease it. I own it. And it has about a 7-year payback. That's reasonable. So energy savings, renewable energy costs money, and it needs to pay for itself and have a return. Feel good, look good, but do nothing energy projects are not what anybody I have in mind, but all the Democrats always have in mind, because of this Solera project, for example, subsidizing a big giant boondoggle solar panel plant that went bankrupt and sucked, I think, $100 million out of the taxpayers' coffers with loans that went bad. Those are renewable energy projects, but they're not the kind of thing that anybody should support. And the people that don't want to pay for it but want to see it don't want to support either. So we need to get out of programs that don't have any kind of ROI, return on investment, or payback of any reasonable sort. And there are renewable energy project programs that pay back in like 20 years. Well, that's not really a very good return. So those don't work. Renewable energy is, I practice what I preach. It can be a great idea, but it needs to pay for itself. And the things that are going on in general don't. The drill baby drill idea is something else that comes to mind, because fuels our economy. You mentioned that earlier. And the idea of cutting down pipelines and stopping drilling and refusing to use our natural resources for our people. We went from an oil exporting country under Trump to an oil importing country under Biden. These are not good things, and they're not what I would support.
Okay. Let me switch gears again, because this obviously elections cost money. We know this. It's one of the reasons why there's such a debate amongst Democrats right now about whether they're going to get rid of Joe Biden, whether it's going to be Kamala Harris at the forefront, because if Biden is gone and there's no Kamala, they have to give back all the money for the 2024 election that's been devoted. So you'll probably see Kamala rise, be in that mix somehow. But elections cost money. And your opponent, Mr. Garcia, has about 74% of his funding is coming from outside of your district, the California 42nd. 32% of that funding in total is coming from outside the state of California. So a third of all his funding is coming from people from everywhere else. Given that, though, and he is down roughly, I believe he's down, I have the number here. I believe he's down about 62% in terms of his funding versus 2022. I ring that up to note that currently you have $250,000 that was loaned by yourself to the campaign. We have not seen any, at least according to FEC regulations, any of the documentation that has been filed as of June 30th. I do not see that you have outside funding that has come in, nor have I seen you spending on anything besides an accountant. So even though your opponent seems to be getting less local support, even though he is raising less money, even though we see that in poll after poll, as Democrats have been moving forward since 2018, there are fewer of them showing up to the election, you're not spending money on the campaign. And I would ask why, or is there something I'm missing?
I'm going into my fundraising role, starting full bore at the end of July, middle of August, and I will be raising money. The current status of the campaigns, though, is the important part. Roberto Garcia has $236,000 on hand, I believe. He raised a whopping $20,000 the last cycle. 2 years ago, he spent, I believe, $3 million against me in the primary. $3 million against little old trustee John Briscoe. And it came from Sam Bankman-Fried. That's the Bankman-Fried giant slush fund of $60 million he chunks in. So he ran against me. He ran as if none of the other five Democrats existed and focused on me. It was Garcia versus Briscoe, and I won and he won. I know Garcia. I've met him. I've had lunch with him for a couple hours with a Democrat friend that arranged it. There's a statistic that floats around. 90% of candidates running for office have never met their opponent, shook their hand, talked to them, discussed things. Well, I have. I know Garcia. We have a lot in common. We both went to Cal State Long Beach. We were both in a fraternity. We both, there's one big difference with his choices of things, but there's a lot in common. And he's not somebody that I endorse, look for, support because his policies are trash. But he only has the same amount of money that I do because he's not raising any money and hasn't raised any money. So I'm not sure all your percentages, I think, reflect what happened with the Bankman-Fried and the union chunking in that he got 2 years ago. Today, whatever money he has may reflect those splits, but it's only $236,000. We're about at a parity standing with funding on hand. And going into the campaign where it is now for him, I don't think it's going to change a lot. So I have an opportunity to outraise and outspend, and that's going to give me a lead, and I will be doing that. Does that answer the money question?
Kind of, yes. You also stated something that's not exactly correct. He has been raising money throughout. He does have more funds than you do. He is spending money more than you have been. So to be correct on the record, that is the current status according to FEC regulations at this moment as of June 30th. Now that may change in the future, no question. And again, much of his funding is coming from outside the state, outside the district, but it is something that has to be addressed.
That being said, the addressing is that I have for that is I'm doing my FEC filings right now, and it'll reflect my spending, and I have spent money.
Okay.
I spent I think like $70,000. Yeah. About $70,000, $75,000, and we'll be spending a lot more once I get my fundraising in motion and gear.
No problem.
It's so.
Yeah, it's just something that it just stands out when I'm looking, when anyone's doing research on you, they look at the spending and they say, well, what's happening? So it's a question that must be addressed for voters and for the public. So I thank you for that answer. That's fine. Obviously, we see that Donald Trump is going to win. And we know that not only because of the debate, not just because of the interview Joe Biden had with George Stephanopoulos, not just because of the assassination attempt against Donald Trump this week, or last week, actually, 1 week ago, but because there has been huge support for Donald Trump in 2016, in 2020. I mean, 81 million votes, 49% of the nation, if you want to count it that way. He's always had a strong support. Going forward, he's looking to be in charge, and we will see many, many changes in the nation. What one issue do you believe that Donald Trump has either stated or you believe he will be addressing is going to have the most impact for California, for your constituents, and perhaps for the rest of the nation as well?
California is the magnet for illegal immigration. It's the magnet for border crossing. It's the magnet because we have a governor and local administrations that don't want to enforce not being here, in addition to the federal laws. His strong policy on keeping people out that don't belong here will have the biggest impact. We can't sustain, we have a housing shortage. Oh, well, when you add 3 million people in 3 years, that may have an impact. That kind of thing is going to have the biggest impact. His threats of a mass deportation, I don't know if that's going to happen. If he did that, that would have a big impact as well. And it was Trump's discussions on enforcing the immigration laws we have and having people not be here that don't belong here and not letting more people in that don't belong here will have the biggest, most immediate direct impact, because there won't be those people filling the low wage, tiny job numbers that reduce the job number, job count, and the amount of money that my constituents need and want.
Okay. So I take it that is something you do support. Not only is it going to impact, but you do support the direction you believe it's going in.
Yes.
Okay.
With Trump, not with the current, not with my.
No, I'm talking about with Trump. I'm talking under a Trump administration. No.
Yeah.
To be clear, yeah. So I have, God, there's so many things like Title IX. There's uh, gun control, which is a very important issue. Perhaps, though, I think we spoke about it briefly. You spoke about Hamas, spoke about the American hostages there, international politics, which we started off with. I'll ask that, and I have one other question afterwards. We've been on for an hour. I appreciate you taking the
Oh,
time. People don't realize it's nighttime where he is right now. So it's the
oh
middle of
no,
the
it,
day
it
for
felt
me.
like
It's
not
end of night.
been like 20 minutes. It felt like I don't my time device is off on my phone with Zoom on. So no, that's amazing. So no, it hasn't felt like it's been a very interesting conversation.
Oh no, I always try to make it interesting. I always like to have an engaged conversation. But let me ask you about Hamas. Now, there are many people who, many progressives, the Democratic Socialists of America, are known for, well, besides rioting and, well, a few other things, but they have a huge support for Hamas. They believe in supporting the terrorist organization over Israel and ignore that Hamas committed an act of terror on October 7th, 2023, that they brutally murdered 1,200 civilians from well over 50 nations around the world with no warning and for no reason, that they captured 256 civilians and tortured them and have sexually abused them, as confirmed by the UN in December of 2023, and have held them now almost 10 months, including 19 Americans and 17 Britons, as well as individuals from other nations around the world.
And
And
they've killed people and they're hostage too. There's dead hostages.
at least 40 to 60, yes. 40 to 60 of the remaining hostages are expected to have died under Hamas's care, not Israel, Hamas itself, to be clear, and this is coming from all international sources. Given that that's the environment we find ourselves in at this moment, that Donald Trump will be walking into that kind of environment, how do you believe, if you are elected to Congress, how would you be able to help Donald Trump and America in resolving that issue or any issue similar to it going forward?
Congress holds the purse strings. And even though Israel doesn't have a constitution they were supposed to write 60 years ago till now, they're the only democratic country in the entire Middle East. There's monarchies like the United Arab Emirates that have no elections at all, and there's Saudi Arabians, and then there's all other the ilk. So Donald Trump will go in. And by the way, Donald Trump's family is half Jewish. I've read people write that Donald Trump's an anti-Semite. His Kushners are Orthodox,
Yeah.
not Chabad, but they're Orthodox Jews. They have two sinks and two refrigerators, and these are not anti-Jewish people in the Trump ledger of things. But he's not a knee-jerk Israeli supporter either. And I believe he's talked about it needs to stop and end. We need our hostages back, and either it needs to go forward full bore, and or it needs to be negotiated. We get our hostages back and set things up. Israel's already, just like I talked about earlier, destroyed the wealth. They've destroyed the wealth of the Palestinians, basically. And that makes the Palestinian Gaza problem diminished for a long time because there's no money, there's no wealth left. So the Donald Trump is going to go in and be the deal maker like he was on his TV show. And he's going to lead the charge to get a solution and get some. No, he's going to be happy with the results. And maybe Bibi will be put out of office even. But it's not because Donald Trump is a Jew lover or a Jew hater. And it's not because he is a Palestinian supporter or not. As a side note, I find most appalling, astonishing appalling, the anti-Semitism, the Nazi rhetoric that these progressive idiots are chanting on our school campuses. It's if I were a Jew, I would be terrified. It's like Kristallnacht again. It would be. It's beyond the pale, and nobody's saying anything loudly or strongly enough either, in my view, about the awfulness, the terribleness. It's horrible what these people are saying and doing on our public school campuses and then on the streets and marching up and down and destroying property for a Nazi stand a stand that resembles the horrible Palestinian public school curriculum of kill, 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 hate, hate Jews. And it's so anyway, there's that. So my view is that Trump is going to come in and help lead to a resolution that nobody's going to love, but it will stop things. Israel's already destroyed the financial basis for Gaza with the housing destruction because the individual family wealth is now a pile of concrete rubble that they're going to have to rebuild. And Israel's bought themselves, I think, maybe 30 years of breathing time to try to figure out a better solution in the long term.
Okay.
That's my take on things.
Okay. So you wouldn't support, like the Biden administration has done, humanitarian aid for Gaza, which we know, according to all international sources, somewhere between 40 to 65% of that, it goes directly to Hamas. You would not support doing that. Is that correct? Like he did with the Houthi terrorists, where Joe Biden, started giving them humanitarian aid, which was then used to buy the rockets they're now using in the Red Sea against American citizens. Am I understanding that correct?
That would be correct.
Okay. Now,
well, no,
John,
I want Palestinians to starve, and we have enough food in the world and in the U.S. to help people in dire needs and straits. But there should be nothing going for that unless we have systems in place to make sure it goes to people, not to the Hamas soldiers who are stabbing, killing, robbing, raping, and the civilians who are involved in that invasion, if that makes sense. So I'm not against Palestinians. I'm against Palestinians being made to starve because of their stupid idiot government. But I'm totally against giving anything that goes to Hamas. Yeah, Hamas has been spending the money that was billions and billions of dollars for food and aid and hospitals on building their stinking tunnels underneath everywhere, all over the place. And everybody knew it, including Israel, that the money was going to build infrastructure for war, death, and destruction. And nobody said or did anything. And now it's like, oh, golly gee, we're surprised there's a tunnel in the middle of the hospital. So no, we don't want to give money and things to support anything with the military Hamas people. But so I don't want Palestinians to starve, but I don't want Hamas to get anything. So if we cannot get money to the Palestinian people without it being siphoned off to Hamas, then no, there can't be any.
Okay, that's a very good clarification. And of course, that's why I made sure we're being very clear about funding for Hamas, not the humanitarian, the people themselves. There is that difference.
Thank you.
Now, for people who are interested, I do want them to know that you can go to John F. Briscoe on YouTube. You have a YouTube channel with about 13 videos on there. By the way, that's all from 2023 or earlier. You can go to John F. Briscoe on X. You can go to John Briscoe on Facebook. Briscoe, again, being spelled Briscoe. And no, it's not Joe Briscoe. That's Texas. We're talking about California. And you can also go to his website at johnbriscoe.us. And all of those will be inserted in the final version of our interview, and it'll be appearing below us throughout the conversation.
And we do take donations, by the way, in all amounts, $1, $5, $10 or more.
Absolutely. And people do, if you found this to be compelling, please do donate to John Briscoe. Please go ahead and do so. Let me end this. I always ask a very simple question, which isn't quite so simple. And that is always, I know we've covered quite a bit of ground. We've talked a little bit about international politics. We've talked about international travel. We've talked about education. We have talked about funding, spending, inflation, homelessness, education. We've covered actually quite a bit of ground here. People may not realize it. Watch it again. You'll see we've covered a lot of ground here. But perhaps there is something that we have not gotten to that you believe is absolutely important, something that you want to share with the audience today that I have not raised at this time. And I want to give you this opportunity now to share anything that you wish with the audience. Go right ahead.
I'm the family man. That's my campaign statement. Es uno de nosotros. Soy un poquito mexicano. And I'm deeply committed to the Spanish-centric aspect of my district. My podcast every week on Estrella de Los Angeles is Spanglish kind of, and it focuses on that, and it's the children. The one thing we really haven't delved in depth, and I won't take the time up here because you've curtailed and truncated, is the children and the way the American
No,
education system.
take as long as you need.
Okay.
I'm not cutting you off. I said, tell
No,
me if there's something you want to speak about it. You're not being cut off. Go ahead.
okay, thank you. I would like to see our parents educated on what their job is as a parent in the current American public school system. We have one set of parents who think because their kid's earning an A and they're having a good time and doing well, they don't need to be the parent and stick their nose into their kid's business, and they don't. And that's one big set of parents. That's a white suburban parent paradigm. And the other is the minority communities, especially the Hispanic communities, where parents come up from Central America and Mexico. In those countries, the school's job is to educate the child, and the parent's job is to be the familia and to provide clothing, housing, church, and relatives and family and love. In our school system here, that's not the job. The parent needs to go do things to help support the education at home. And I believe our parents don't know. Is it something a congressman can fix? I don't know. It's not, I've never been asked that question, but it's something we don't do very well, educating parents. And one of the big things that parents can do is to go on to their students, what's called a portal. Most every school district now has a system in place where all the grades earned, the work done and turned in, and comments are posted for the student, a child to see, and the parent to see. And I have a whole bunch of intersections with families, not even in my own school district, where the parents had no idea what the portal was or is, how to get into it. And for sure, the students don't tell mom and dad how to go spy on them for their grades and their work they've done. And the parents don't know. And they don't. And then there's also the Mexican, I call it the Mexican education problem, where the parents just don't understand. Their job doesn't stop at the school door entrance. Their job starts at the school door entrance. When the child comes home, they need to involve and engage in checking homework before it goes in, going in the portal at least to see if they've been turning their homework assignments in, what kind of grades they're earning, and get in to see the teacher. Schools have all kinds of support systems to help children succeed. And our parents aren't taking advantage of those, and the children are suffering, learning academically, emotionally. So the big one is our children, our education, and there's a whole lot of things to do better, but specifically in our education, to help train our parents how to use the tools that are there, fairly time efficient. How long does it take to log into a website and look and see what your child's done? And train them how to sit down with their child to look at it together. My advocacy is that parents sit down once a week with each child, turn on and look into the website and see what's going on and celebrate good grades and ask what's going on with bad grades. And if there's anything that needs to be delved into by the parent, like going into the office, the school, and asking for help, tutoring, and after school programs, that they get in and do that. That's the way children will catch up and learn up to the 21st century. So parent education on being a parent in our public school system will help the children a lot. That's my advocacy.
Well, children is an important advocacy. I mean, without the children, we don't have a continuing nation. So obviously, very important issue. And I'm glad that you were able to share that with the voters. I think it is important. And I apologize that I didn't think of more questions along those lines. But, can't cover everything. I try to get the big things. That being said, we have covered quite a bit of ground, as I mentioned. There are still far more things to find out. And I do advise people, please do go to the website, do go to the other sites, as we have mentioned, on YouTube, on X, on Facebook, and on the campaign website to learn more for yourself about this campaign. This is the California 42nd District. That's Long Beach. Even though you're outside of the district, or if you're inside the district, you can give to the campaign, and you can be part of this. So please do reach out. John, I hope there's still, 118 days left before the election. So about three and some change months. I hope to have another opportunity to speak with you before the election, see how things have changed, how they've updated. You're always welcome onto the channel at any time because we do the Sunday live stream. You're always welcome to call in. But I just want to thank you for taking time out of your family vacation, your time with your family to speak with us, to share some of your thoughts and to clarify some of the questions that we had.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I will be back. I'll be back with you, and I'll look forward to seeing you in DC.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.